Welcome to Day 57, Leviticus 13, verse 18. When a boil appears on the skin of one's body and it heals, and a white swelling or a reddish-white spot develops where the boil was, the person must present himself to the priest. The priest will make an examination, and if the spot seems to be beneath the skin and the hair in it has turned white, the priest must pronounce him unclean. It is a skin disease that has broken out in the boil. But when the priest examines it, if there is no white hair in it and it is not beneath the skin but it is faded, the priest must quarantine him 7 days. If it spreads further on the skin, the priest must pronounce him unclean. It is an infection. But if the spot remains where it is and does not spread, it is only the scar from the boil. The priest is to pronounce him clean. When there is a burn on the skin of one's body produced by fire, and the patch made raw by the burn becomes a reddish-white or white spot, the priest is to examine it. If the hair in the spot has turned white, and the spot appears to be deeper than the skin, it is a skin disease that has broken out in the burn. The priest must pronounce him unclean. It is a skin disease. But when the priest examines it, if there is no white hair in the spot and it is not beneath the skin but is faded, the priest must quarantine him 7 days. The priest will re-examine him on the 7th day. If it has spread further on the skin, the priest must pronounce him unclean. It is a skin disease. But if the spot has remained where it was and has not spread on the skin but is faded, it is the swelling from the burn. The priest is to pronounce him clean, for it is only the scar from the burn. When a man or woman has an infection on the head or chin, the priest must examine the infection. If it appears to be deeper than the skin and the hair in it is yellow and sparse, the priest must pronounce the person unclean. It is a scaly outbreak, a skin disease of the head or chin. When the priest examines the scaly infection, if it does not appear to be deeper than the skin and there is no black hair in it, the priest must quarantine the person within the scaly infection for 7 days. The priest will re-examine the infection on the 7th day. If the scaly outbreak has not spread and there is no yellow hair in it and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, the person must shave himself but not shave the scaly area. Then the priest must quarantine the person who has the scaly outbreak for another 7 days. The priest will examine the scaly outbreak on the 7th day, and if it has not spread on the skin and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, the priest is to pronounce the person clean. He is to wash his clothes, and he will be clean. But if the scaly outbreak spreads further on the skin after his cleansing, the priest is to examine the person. If the scaly outbreak has spread on the skin, the priest does not need to look for yellow hair. The person is unclean. But if, as far as he can see, the scaly outbreak remains unchanged and black hair has grown in it, then it has healed. He is clean. The priest is to pronounce the person clean. When a man or a woman has white spots on the skin of the body, the priest is to make an examination. If the spots on the skin of the body are dull white, it is only a rash that has broken out on the skin. The person is clean. If a man loses the hair on his head, he is bald, but he is clean. Or if he loses the hair at his hairline, he is bald on his forehead, but he is clean. But if there is a reddish-white infection on the bald head or forehead, it is a skin disease breaking out on his head or forehead. The priest is to examine him, and if the swelling of the infection on his bald head or forehead is reddish-white, like the appearance of a skin disease on his body, the man is afflicted with a skin disease. He is unclean. The priest must pronounce him unclean. The infection is on his head. The person afflicted with an infectious skin disease is to have his clothes torn and his hair hanging loose, and he must cover his mouth and cry out, "Unclean! Unclean!" He will remain unclean as long as he has the infection. He is unclean. He must live alone in a place outside the camp. If a fabric is contaminated with mildew, in wool or linen fabric, in the warp or woof of linen or wool, or in leather or anything made of leather, and if the contamination is green or red in the fabric, the leather, the warp, the woof, or any leather article, it is a mildew contamination, and it is to be shown to the priest. The priest is to examine the contamination and quarantine the contaminated fabric for 7 days. The priest is to re-examine the contamination on the 7th day. If it has spread in the fabric, the warp, the woof, or the leather, regardless of how it is used, the contamination is harmful mildew. It is unclean. He is to burn the fabric. The warp or woof in wool or linen or any leather article which is contaminated, since it is harmful mildew, it must be burned up. When the priest examines it, if the contamination has not spread in the fabric, the warp or woof or any leather article, the priest is to order whatever is contaminated to be washed and quarantined for another 7 days. After it has been washed, the priest is to re-examine the contamination. If the appearance of the contaminated article has not changed, it is unclean. Even though the contamination has not spread, you must burn up the fabric. It is a fungus on the front or back of the fabric. If the priest examines it and the contamination has faded after it has been washed, he must cut the contaminated section out of the fabric, the leather or the warp or woof. But if it reappears in the fabric, the warp or woof or any leather article, it has broken out again. You must burn up whatever is contaminated. But if the contamination disappears from the fabric, the warp or woof, or any leather article which have been washed, it is to be washed again, and it will be clean. This is the law concerning a mildew contamination in wool or linen fabric, warp or woof, or any leather article, in order to pronounce it clean or unclean. Chapter 14, Leviticus. The Lord spoke to Moses, "This is the law concerning the person afflicted with skin disease on the day of his cleansing. He is to be brought to the priest, who will go outside the camp and examine him. If the skin disease has disappeared from the afflicted person, the priest will order that 2 live clean birds, cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop be brought for the one who is to be cleansed. Then the priest will order that one of the birds be slaughtered over fresh water in a clay pot. He is to take the live bird together with the cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop, and dip them all into the blood of the bird that was slaughtered over the fresh water. He will then sprinkle the blood 7 times on the one who is to be cleansed from the skin disease. He is to pronounce him clean and release the live bird over the open countryside. The one who is to be cleansed must wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, and bathe with water. He is clean. Afterwards he may enter the camp, but he must remain outside his tent for 7 days. He is to shave off all his hair again on the 7th day. His head, his beard, his eyebrows, and the rest of his hair. He is to wash his clothes and bathe himself with water. He is clean. On the 8th day he must take 2 unblemished male lambs, an unblemished year-old ewe lamb, a grain offering of 3 quarts of fine flour mixed with olive oil, and 1/3 of a quart of olive oil. The priest who performs the cleansing will place the person who is to be cleansed, together with these offerings, before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. The priest is to take 1 male lamb and present it as a restitution offering, along with 1/3 of olive oil, and he must wave them as a presentation offering before the Lord. He is to slaughter the male lamb at the place in the sanctuary area where the sin offering and burnt offering are slaughtered. For like the sin offering, the restitution offering belongs to the priest. It is especially holy. The priest is to take some of the blood from the restitution offering and put it on the lobe of the right ear of the one to be cleansed, on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. Continuing with day 57, Psalm 27, verses 1 through 6. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom should I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom should I be afraid? When evildoers came against me to devour my flesh, my foes and my enemies stumbled and fell. Though an army deploy against me, my heart is not afraid. Though war break out against me, still I am confident. I have asked one thing from the Lord. It is what I desire, to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, gazing on the beauty of the Lord and seeking him in his temple. For he will conceal me in his shelter in the day of adversity. He will hide me under the cover of his tent. He will set me high on a rock. Then my head will be high above my enemies around me. I will offer sacrifices in his tent with shouts of joy. I will sing and make music to the Lord. Proverbs chapter 6, verses 20 through 22. My son, keep your father's command, and don't reject your mother's teaching. Always bind them to your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you walk here and there, they will guide you. When you lie down, they will watch over you. When you wake up, they will talk to you. Mark chapter 4, starting at verse 21. He also said to them, Is a lamp brought in to be put under a basket or under a bed? Isn't it to be put on a lampstand? For nothing is concealed except to be revealed, and nothing hidden except come to light. If anyone has ears to hear, he should listen. Then he said to them, Pay attention to what you hear. By the measure you use, it will be measured and added to you. For to the one who has, it will be given, and from the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. The kingdom of God is like this. He said, A man scatters seed on the ground. He sleeps and rises night and day, and the seed sprouts and grows. He doesn't know how. The soil produces a crop by itself, first the blade, then the head, and then the ripe grain on the head. But as soon as the crop is ready, he sends for the sickle, because harvest has come. But he said, How can we illustrate the kingdom of God? What parable can we use to describe it? It's like a mustard seed that when sown in the soil is smaller than all the seeds on the ground. And when sown, it comes up and grows taller than all the vegetables and produces large branches so that the birds of the sky can nest in its shade. He would speak the word to them with many parables like these, as they were able to understand. And he did not speak to them without a parable. Privately, however, he would explain everything to his own disciples. On that day, when evening had come, he told them, Let's cross over to the other side of the lake. So they left the crowd and took him along, since he was already in the boat, and other boats were with him. A fierce windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking over the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, sleeping on the cushion. So they woke him up and said to him, Teacher, don't you care that we're going to die? He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, Silence, be still. The wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Then he said to them, Why are you fearful? Do you still have no faith?" And they were terrified and asked one another, "Who then is this? Even the wind and the sea obey him."